15 accountants failed, but one delivery girl revealed an incredible truth that changed everything. Ruby zipped through the rain-soaked streets of Maplewood, her heart racing as she clutched a stack of pizzas. She knew she was running late, but it didn't matter. The little bell on her bike jingled cheerfully, cutting through the gloom. Everyone in town knew Ruby. She was more than just a delivery girl. She was a lifeline to the busy families trying to keep their heads above water. As she weaved between puddles, she couldn't shake the feeling that change was in the air, the kind that could shake the very foundation of her town. Just last week, a horde of 15 accountants stormed into Maplewood, armed with graphs and plans to revitalize the local economy. Ruby watched them from behind the counter at her family's struggling pizza shop. They threw around words like growth and strategy, but to her, they felt like strangers speaking a different language. As the weather turned ominous, the townsfolk grew wary, but the accountants seemed unmoved, rolling out their theories with reckless ambition. That stormy night when Ruby made her deliveries, doubts began to creep in. Pulling up to the town hall, she overheard their hushed voices through the cracked window. They talked about community outreach but seemed more focused on numbers than the people behind them. They need to understand that plans won't fix what's broken. One of them grumbled. Ruby felt her chest tighten. Didn't they see? The heart of Maplewood wasn't in spreadsheets. It was in the laughter of neighbors, the kindness of an open door, and the strength found in vulnerability. Suddenly, dark clouds enveloped the town, and panic pierced the air. The storm surged with aggression, threatening to flood Maplewood. Ruby felt adrenaline kick in. This is it, she thought, a spark igniting within her. She hopped off her bike and sprinted through the downpour, hollering for her neighbors. We need to come together. Now. Ruby's voice cut through the chaos. Doors opened. Neighbors poured out midnight blue raincoats, flashlights flickering like fireflies, shouts of determination hanging thick in the air. They rallied, exchanging supplies and making plans to safeguard each other as homes. It was a flurry of action, each shared smile strengthening their bond. It felt electric. Ruby was at the center, knitting together their community with the very threads the accountants had overlooked. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The storm raged on, and so did their unity. They lifted each other's spirits against the darkness, battling against the rising waters. But when the winds died down and daylight broke, so did tension. As Ruby surveyed the scene, her heart swelled with pride. But then a voice cut through her joy. David, one of those smug accountants, stood amidst the crowd, arms crossed. This won't hold for long. You're just lucky there's no real danger. Stung. Ruby felt her confidence crumble. How could he belittle every ounce of community they had built? Could she prove herself against his arrogance, rooted in the very ideals he failed to comprehend? Battling doubt, Ruby pushed forward, victories weighing heavier than words. Could she be the beacon of hope this town needed? What would happen when the truth behind David's plans unraveled, leaving her wondering if luck alone could provide the authenticity of community she had come to cherish? The clouds had parted, but her struggle was just beginning. The sunlight crept through the afterstorm haze, illuminating the chaos left behind. Ruby stood amongst the familiar faces of Maplewood, now painted with exhaustion but driven by a bond forged in the storm. She could hear the whispers around her, full of gratitude mixed with doubt. We did it, but what's next? They asked each other, uncertainty creeping in like shadows in the fading light. Ruby felt it too. The energy they had harnessed during the storm was wavering as reality settled back in. David stepped forward, his presence like a thunderhead, darkening the mood. This is not sustainable, he declared, his voice cutting through the crowd. You can't rely on this camaraderie. They'll fade just like the storm. Ruby's heart raced. Could he be right? What if their unity vanished as quickly as it had formed? Panic flared within her, but she refused to sink into despair. She cleared her throat, mustering everything she had inside. It's not just camaraderie, she shouted, her voice steady and firm. cracking through the murmur of the crowd. "We didn't just survive. We built something real." The townsfolk turned to her, eyes wide with caution, curiosity, and a budding belief that maybe she was onto something. "What if we keep this spirit alive?" Ruby continued, emboldened by their attention. "We can create community events, support one another's businesses, share resources. We're stronger together and we've got proof." She watched as the fire ignited in their eyes, a shared recognition of the power they held. Tentatively, a woman named Joanne stepped forward. "I've seen Ruby deliver pizzas with a smile on her face, even when we couldn't afford to tip her. She's part of our family here. We can do this." Cheers erupted as Ruby felt a shift in the atmosphere. Legs that trembled moments ago now danced with possibility. One by one, neighbors jumped in, brainstorming ideas to keep the momentum alive. A farmer's market, a neighborhood newsletter, movie nights under the stars, excitement coursed through the air like electricity. But David wasn't backing down. "You think that'll work?" he scoffed. "You're wasting your time dreaming. This town is too far gone for fairy tales." Her heart dropped, but she stood firm. "That's where you're wrong, David. We're the only ones who can make this town matter again. No accounting firm can fix what community can." As Ruby sustained his glare, she felt the weight of all the years in this town on her shoulders. Memories flooded her: the pizza shop thriving, children laughing in the streets, neighbors helping each other without hesitation. She realized that David represented an outdated way of thinking, a model that prioritized profits over people. Suddenly the ground beneath them shifted. A rumble echoed from the edge of town, and a low hum surged through the crowd. "What now?" someone shouted, panic rising again. Ruby spun around only to see a low plume of smoke rising. It seemed to be coming from where the accountants had set up their temporary office. "Wait!" Ruby yelled, adrenaline pumping as she sprinted towards the smoke, the crowd trailing behind her. She could feel their energy bubble back to life, but an icy knot formed in her stomach. What was happening? As they reached the scene, they were met with chaos. Papers fluttered in the air like fallen leaves, and the accountants were frantically trying to contain a fire that had broken out in their makeshift shelter. Ruby's heart raced. Was this a sign of something deeper? She stepped up, not just as a delivery girl, but as a leader forged in the storm. "We've got to help," she cried, rallying the townsfolk to lend a hand. Perhaps this was the moment she had been waiting for her town to truly unite against adversity. Could she channel their collective strength to face yet another challenge? As they fought against the flames together, Ruby wondered, how far could their newfound resolve take them? The road ahead seemed uncertain, but she felt a flicker of hope. The truth was beginning to unfold, and she was ready to embrace it. What lay beyond the flames? Smoke hung thick in the air, an acrid reminder of the chaos. Ruby stood rooted to the ground, as the townsfolk rushed past her with buckets of water and old blankets. They were moving, they were acting, and it was exactly what her heart had ached for. "Quick! Over here!" she shouted, pointing to where the flames licked greedily at a pile of file boxes, hungry and ferocious. Every instinct in her urged her to leap into the fray. They didn't have time to think, only time to act. Joanne, the woman who had stepped forward during her speech, was right beside Ruby. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Yet she gritted her teeth, determination rising in her eyes. "Me too," Ruby replied, voice steady, "but we can't let fear win. Not now." They filled their buckets and joined the line, passing water along with swift movements as the fire crackled and popped ominously. David stood off to the side, looking more solemn than before. Ruby could see the conflict in his gaze. This moment, chaotic as it was, appeared to be stirring something in him. She hoped he could feel the strength binding the line of neighbors together, the trust threading their hearts, but he just stared ahead, jaw clenched. They worked as a single entity. Neighbors who had not spoken in months stood side by side, faces lined with dirt, but eyes shining with resolve. Ruby felt alive, like she was part of something much bigger than herself. With each bucket she passed along, she felt hope grow in her chest. Finally, after what felt like hours, the flames sputtered and died, extinguished by the collective will of a town refusing to let go of its spirit. Everyone stood panting, hands on hips, staring at the charred remains of what had once been a makeshift office filled with hopes of returning to normalcy. Cheers erupted as the last hissing embers faded into smoke, But Ruby's heart sank a little. What would the accountants do now? Would Maplewood's struggles grow in the wake of this calamity? David approached, the tension in his face softening but not entirely leaving. You know, he started, and Ruby braced for a fight. If we can pull together for this. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe, she echoed, throwing him a hopeful glance. If he could admit to a change of heart, it would mean so much. He rubbed the back of his neck. I still think rebuilding won't fix everything. But if this town can rise from a fire together, who's to say what we can't do? The fire extinguished. Echoes of laughter began to replace the nervous energy that had gripped them moments before. People started hugging, sharing stories of bravery. Ruby's heart swelled. It wasn't just about surviving anymore, it was about thriving. Let us come back tomorrow, she suggested, a thought bubbling up like fresh spring water. We should have a block party. Celebrate. Yes, we've faced hard times, but we're going to keep working together. A wave of agreement rippled through the crowd. Yes, let us do it, Joanne exclaimed, eyes sparkling as she spoke, her smile infectious as the sun sank lower, painting the sky in vibrant oranges and pinks. Ruby looked around at the smiles, the renewed connections, and felt an overwhelming surge of hope. They were more than neighbors now. They were a family reformed. But deep down, Ruby sensed pressure building. The aftermath of the fire whispered that this moment was just the beginning. The real challenge lay ahead, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something else was brewing, a storm that might be even more formidable than the last. She took a deep breath, knowing one thing for sure. They weren't finished yet. What unseen trial loomed on the horizon, waiting to test their fragile new unity? The next morning, Ruby woke up to the sound of cheerful birds outside her window. The familiar scent of coffee wafted from the kitchen, but it felt different today, somehow sharper, more alive. She smiled as she pulled on her jeans, the thought of the block party swirling in her mind like confetti in the wind. Quickly, she put together a few trays of cookies, imagining the laughter and chatter that would fill the air later on. As she walked down the street, the town still bore the scars of last night's blaze, but the resilience in the eyes of her neighbors made her heart race in an exhilarating way. People were cleaning up, mending fences, and planting flowers, small gestures that made all the difference. Tensions had morphed into determination. Ruby! Hey! It was Joanne rushing toward her, her curls bouncing with each step. Did you see the Facebook post about the party? Everyone's excited. Yes. I think it's brilliant, Ruby said, her voice bubbling over with enthusiasm. We need to make this an event to remember, a chance to celebrate our spirit. The two women brainstormed ideas as they reached the town square, where others had begun setting up folding tables and decorating with colorful streamers. Ruby's heart warmed at the sight. This place had once felt fractured but was now transforming into a haven of unity. Amidst the joyful chaos, David arrived, his presence commanding but now bearing a lightness Ruby hadn't noticed before. Hey, he said simply, scanning the scene with a hint of admiration. Looks good, right? Ruby's voice held a spark of hope, welcoming his presence. Really good, he replied, clearing his throat. You know, this is the first time I've seen everyone come together like this since. He paused, eyes flickering to the charred remnants nearby. It feels different, doesn't it? Exactly, Ruby exclaimed, nudging his shoulder playfully. This fire opened so many doors. That's a way to look at it. David smiled, glancing around. But what if we're not ready for what's coming next? Ruby hesitated. Something in his voice resonated, a note of fear tucked beneath cautious optimism. You think something's going to happen? David ran a hand through his hair. It's just, I've seen towns lose their spark before. A crisis can tear people apart as much as it brings them together. I want to believe we can hold on to this feeling. There was an intensity in his gaze that made Ruby's heart skip. Then let us make sure we do, she insisted. This isn't just one party. It's our chance to solidify our bond. As more townsfolk arrived, the festive atmosphere grew vibrant. Children ran around with balloons, while the sweet aroma of grilled burgers filled the air. Laughing voices echoed like music, and for a moment, Ruby relished the normalcy that was beginning to blanket the town. Yet, as the sun dipped lower, blending into cool shadows, Ruby couldn't ignore the gnawing worry. What if these joyful moments masked potential divisions? Was their unity as solid as the warmth they felt? As twilight descended, the town gathered for a bonfire. Faces glowed in the flickering light, laughter ringing out. But Ruby's heart raced with a mixture of joy and apprehension. She sensed that behind the laughter lay untold stories, unaddressed fears, and perhaps a hidden truth that had yet to reveal itself. When the time came for speeches, Ruby leaned into the warmth beside her neighbors. She felt a surge of gratitude for them, all their courage, their spirit, but that pulsing anxiety in her chest wouldn't fade. What truths were hidden in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to emerge? And would they be ready to face whatever lay beyond the light? As Ruby stood near the bonfire, the crackle of the wood echoed her racing heart. Faces flickered in the warm glow, each one a story, each laugh a fragile bond. She watched David, who was animatedly talking with a group, his hands gesturing wildly. A pang of longing surged within her, infused with hope and a hint of something unspoken. This moment felt electric. It was as if they were all teetering on the edge, ready for something monumental to shift the very fabric of their community. The speeches began with Joe the mayor lifting his voice above the crowd. "Tonight we stand together. Not just as neighbors but as family." His words ignited applause, the sound echoing against the backdrop of the night sky. Each person seemed to swell with pride, but Ruby's thoughts drifted, caught between celebration and worry. After Joe came Joanne, whose heartfelt tribute to their town made Ruby smile. As Joanne spoke of resilience, Ruby felt the collective heartbeat of the crowd, a rhythmic pulse of unity. Yet, that familiar knot in her stomach tightened. What if beneath this facade of togetherness, shadows lurked, waiting to unravel their tight-knit community? As the speeches continued, Ruby turned her attention to the edges of the crowd. The shadows seemed deeper there, and for a fleeting moment, she noticed a figure, someone lurking, watching, their face obscured. The instinct to question nagged at her. David saw her expression and leaned closer. "What's wrong? Did you see that?" Ruby nodded toward the figure. "Feels off." David squinted, but the figure had vanished into the dark. Probably just someone passing by. No reason to worry. But Ruby could hardly focus on his reassurance. Her instincts thrummed louder than ever. Once the speeches ended, the crowd broke into chatter and laughter again, enjoying music and games. Ruby and David moved with them, but something gnawed at her. A shadow of doubt lingered, and it mixed with the euphoric air of celebration, creating an undercurrent Ruby couldn't shake. As the night grew deeper, Ruby slipped away from the crowd, feeling compelled to unearth the truth behind the figure. She found a quiet spot beyond the festivities, where the laughter faded into the wind. Taking a deep breath, she looked around, scanning for any sign of the figure. And then she saw it. A glimmer caught her eye, something metallic jutting from the underbrush. It beckoned to her, almost vibrating with urgency. As she brushed aside the leaves, her heart thudded. The light reflected off a torn package, faded and weathered, with familiar lettering, one she recognized all too well. "Delivery from last week," she whispered, remembering the frustration over the missed order. The mind whirled. Who had it belonged to? Before she could dig deeper, the sound of footsteps emerged from the darkness. Ruby turned sharply, her heart pounding. It was David, his brows furrowed in concern. "I found you. I thought you might have." "What is that?" In an instant they both leaned over the package, a sense of foreboding thick in the air. This was more than just trash. What if this is connected to last night? Ruby breathed, the weight of potential revelations settling on her shoulders. David picked it up cautiously. "We need to look inside." This could be. Before he could finish, a rustle from the bushes interrupted them, and then silence. Ruby felt a chill wrap around her. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Suddenly, uncertainty hung in the air like a charged storm, heavy and electric. The past few hours of laughter and unity faded away, replaced by the thickening tension of the unknown. What truth lay hidden here? And who was watching them from the darkness? With hearts racing and hands trembling, they knew this was just the beginning. The shadows were closing in, and the real story was only starting to unfold. Ruby's eyes darted around the dimly lit area, searching for the source of the noise. Shadows danced around them, but the soft hum of the bonfire had vanished, leaving an unsettling stillness in its wake. "Do you think someone is out there?" she whispered, more to herself than to David. Her gut twisted, urging her to retreat back to the safety of the crowd. But curiosity tethered her to the spot, pulsing with the excitement of a half-formed possibility. I don't know. David's voice trailed off as he peered into the darkness. He tightened his grip on the package, as if it were a lifeline. Maybe it's just an animal? We're not that far from the woods. An animal? Ruby scoffed, though the words fell flat against her rising unease. She felt a thrill and fear mix within her, battling for control of her instincts. What if it's something more? Slowly, she reached for the package, her fingers brushing against its rough surface like an old secret begging to be uncovered. We can't ignore this, she stated firmly, glancing up at David, who still bore a look of doubt. If it's connected to what happened last night, then it means something, right? Yeah, but David hesitated, glancing toward the rustling bushes. What if we're just getting ahead of ourselves? What if this is nothing? Before Ruby could argue, she felt a wind whip past them, carrying the scent of charred wood and unexpected tension. You know there's more to this town than meets the eye. If we don't find out now, what if it's too late? David shifted, glancing back toward the festivities, where the laughter sounded sharper, more strained. Even those joyful notes seemed to be veiling deeper anxieties. Okay, let us just. But before he could suggest a plan, the bushes rustled again. A figure emerged this time, stepping into the faint light, a tall man with a guarded stance, his face shadowed by the low-hanging branches. Who's there? Ruby called out, her heart racing. Stay back. The man shouted, suddenly firm, raising his hands defensively. Ruby felt her breath catch in her throat. I'm not here to cause trouble. What do you want? David demanded, stepping in front of Ruby protectively. The weight of the night thickened, and she felt herself wavering between fear and intrigue. I need to talk. About the package, the man stammered, glancing between them nervously. There was desperation in his eyes, and Ruby's heart softened just a little. The delivery? What do you know? She asked, thrusting herself into the moment, leaving behind her earlier hesitations. It's not what you think, he said hurriedly. You need to understand this town, it's not what it seems. Someone's watching you. The words hung heavy in the air, resonating with Ruby's deepest fears. David frowned, uncertainty brushing across his features. What do you mean? Tonight is only the beginning. If you two are involved, there's no turning back. You have to decide, are you in this together? Or will you run? Ruby felt the weight of his question settle like a stone in her stomach, and in that moment, darkness seemed to press in closer around them. Run. She echoed, adrenaline surging. What if she could uncover a truth that could either shatter their community or bind it closer together? She looked up at David, who met her gaze, concern mingling with determination. Well, what do you say? David said softly, a quiet storm brewing in his eyes. The man's eyes darted back, fear sparking again. You don't have much time. They'll come for you. With every heartbeat echoing through her veins, Ruby contemplated her choice. Either way, the journey ahead felt inevitable, swirling with secrets and revelations. We need to find out the truth together, she finally declared, the heat of their shared resolve igniting her spirit. Around them the world felt charged, and as they turned to face the shadows, they all knew. This wasn't the end, it was the time where everything, including their fates, would shift. But in the depths of the night, lurking behind unseen corners, the real question remained: who exactly was watching them, and what truth would they uncover? Next, Ruby felt a mixture of excitement and terror ripple through her as she tuned back into the man's words. They'll come for you. The weight of his foreboding warning clung to the air. David's jaw tightened, his brows knitting together in concentration. She could see the gears turning in his mind, where doubt battled with an undeniable pull toward the mystery before them. Why do you care? David asked, pulling Ruby close as if to shield her from something unseen. If you know something about the package, what's in it for you? The man took a step forward, something akin to desperation flickering in his eyes. You don't understand. I want to help you. I've seen what they do to people who ask too many questions. But who are they? Ruby pressed, unable to chase away the whispers of fear threatening to consume her. The figure inhaled deeply, grounding himself before speaking again. There are secrets in this town, dark things. You need to trust me if you want to survive. Ruby felt a strange connection to the man, as if they shared a bond forged in uncertainty. She glanced at David, who caught her eye with a nod of encouragement. There was an understanding between them, a silent agreement that they couldn't ignore the warning. How do we know we can trust you? Came David's skepticism, still alive and breathing. Look, I can't give you all the answers here, the man shot back. But if you want, I can show you where to start. His voice had a raw urgency laced with pleading. Time is running out. Ruby's heart raced. Show us then. She couldn't ignore the pull of curiosity, the thrill of unlocking a door that had long been shut. Follow me, the man said, glancing behind him nervously before leading them into the shadows. They moved quietly, breaking away from the dying glow of the bonfire and the distant laughter that felt more like a haunting echo than a celebration. Each step deeper into the woods was charged with the scent of pine and an undercurrent of danger. Wait, Ruby breathed, half turning to glance back. What about the others? We can't just leave them. Her heart felt torn, a thread of loyalty fraying at the edges as they slipped away. They'll be fine for now, the man assured, his voice steady. You won't understand until you see it for yourselves. The brush crunched beneath their feet while the night sky cloaked them in shadows. David moved closer to Ruby, instinctively protective. The air grew cooler, and off in the distance, a low sound reverberated, a thrumming that felt like it resonated deep within her chest. What is that? Ruby asked, her eyes widening with both fear and fascination. Just keep moving, the man urged, glancing back. We're almost there. The path narrowed, leading them to a hidden clearing. Moonlight bathed the scene in silvery light, revealing an old shed that seemed to have been forgotten by time. It leaned to one side, and the wooden walls creaked as if whispering secrets only they could hear. Standing before it, Ruby sensed a shift in the atmosphere, as though the very air buzzed with anticipation. What's inside? She asked, curiosity pulling at her insides. The man hesitated for the briefest moment. Truth and lies. As he pushed open the shed door, a rush of cool air spilled out, bringing with it the scent of damp earth and mystery. Ruby's breath quickened. They were on the edge of something profound, a discovery that could change everything. But as the door creaked open wider, Ruby's heart plummeted. She caught a glimpse of something inside that sent chills racing down her spine, a glint of cold metal among the shadows. What is that? She whispered, her voice barely escaping her lips. Something you've been searching for. Truth doesn't always shine brightly, the man replied somberly, his gaze fixed on the darkness beyond. Just then, a flash of movement caught her eye outside the clearing. They're here, he said, panic rising in his voice. All of a sudden, Ruby realized the hunt was not just for answers. It was for survival. Get inside, David shouted, urgency flooding his voice as he urged her forward. But as they stepped into darkness, a thought sliced through Ruby's mind. Was she ready to face whatever nightmare awaited them? And in that defining moment, suffocated by shadows, the question became clear. What could they possibly reveal in the night that would change everything? The moment they stepped inside, Ruby felt the weight of darkness settle around them like a thick fog. The man pushed the door shut behind them, sealing them in a world that felt both trapped and alive. What now? David asked, the urgency in his voice like a lifeline that anchored Ruby in the swirling uncertainty. Give your eyes a moment, the man replied. His silhouette moved deeper into the shed, and faint glimmers began to materialize in the dim light filtering through cracks in the wood. Shelves lined the walls, cluttered with dust-covered boxes and tools that looked like they hadn't seen the light of day in years. Ruby's heart pounded. She stood frozen, trying to comprehend both the chaos around her and the tremors of fear gnawing at her insides. What did you mean about the truth? Ruby asked, her voice steadying, though uncertainty lurked in her tone. The man turned, his eyes glistening with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. Everything is connected. This town, its past, it's wrapped up in these walls. The package you found? It's only the beginning. As he spoke, his hands began to rummage through one of the boxes. David stepped closer, drawn by an instinct to protect Ruby but equally curious about what they might uncover. She leaned in, straining to see. The man pulled out an old photograph, creased and faded, and held it toward them. This was taken decades ago, he said, voice low. These people, they're part of a story they don't want you to know. Ruby squinted at the image. Faces stared back at her, some familiar and others not. She felt a strange twinge of recognition. They look like people from around here. Yes, the man nodded. But more than that. They were part of something that's been hidden. Something that could expose the very foundation on which this town stands. Expose? David frowned, crossing his arms. What do you mean? They used to call it a cover-up, but it's more than that. It's about power and control, the man explained, his voice gaining urgency as he spoke. Those who run things here, they can't let anyone ask too many questions. A chill ran through Ruby at the thought of powerful people pulling strings, shaping lives. She glanced nervously at David, who met her gaze with a determined expression. They weren't just investigating a mystery. They were standing at the brink of something dangerous. What do we do with this? Ruby whispered, gripping David's arm. We start by bringing it into the light, the man replied, tucking the photograph back into the box. But first you need to understand what you're risking. If they know you're asking questions, they'll come for you. A chilling silence filled the air, the weight of the warning settling heavily on their shoulders. Ruby could almost hear the echoing footsteps of dread approaching. A shadow moved outside the shed, and she caught the faint outline of figures, their presence looming ominously beyond the cracked walls. It's already begun, the man whispered, his voice trembling. They're closer than you think. Who are they? David asked, turning sharply towards the door. They're just the beginning, the man gritted, his brow furrowed. But if you want to expose the truth, you need to dig deeper. The first glimmer of defiance stirred within Ruby. It was time to take a stand, to uncover not just the secrets buried in shadows, but the very heart of a conspiracy that could unravel their lives. Then let us dig deep, Ruby said, a fierce determination rising in her chest. We won't be silenced. But as she steeled herself for the challenges ahead, the sound of footsteps drew closer, and a sense of dread washed over her. Get ready, the man said urgently. Whatever happens next, don't let them know you're afraid. With hearts pounding and breaths quickening, they held on to hope, knowing they were on the brink of discovering a truth that could change everything. But the question loomed larger than ever. What price would they have to pay for that truth? The heaviness in the air thickened as they processed the man's warning. Ruby's heartbeat pulsed in her ears. The noise outside grew louder, heavy boots marching toward them. David stiffened, scanning the dim room for an escape route. The man held out a hand, urging them to stay calm. We need to think. Panic won't help. Then what do we do? Ruby whispered, her voice barely audible against the impending dread. If they were to uncover the truth, they needed to act fast. But every instinct told her that they were caught in a web far larger than they could have imagined. Keep quiet, the man instructed as he moved towards a small window, peering cautiously through the grime-coated glass. The shadows beyond were closer now, voices muffled yet edged with authority. They're looking for someone, it could be us, he murmured, his voice trembling slightly. For a heartbeat, Ruby's mind raced. Her life had already felt trapped, working late shifts delivering groceries, struggling to make ends meet, but now here she was, on the cusp of something that could destroy everything she knew. They can't find us here, right? David's eyes darted to the door, then back to the man. We can just stay hidden? It's not that simple, the man replied, his voice sharp. They have ways of making people talk. If they find us, that question about the truth could come at a terrible cost. Ruby felt a flicker of anger ignite within her. She thought of the photo of those faces staring at her, the lives they lived, the stories they left behind. What if we don't let them catch us? Her determination began to swell as possibilities unfolded in her mind. What if we confront them? We could gather proof, gather support. Support? The man shook his head. That's risky. You think these people value any opinions that challenge their power? They can't silence everyone. David interjected, his voice gaining strength. What if we gather the others, the ones in that photo? We can rally people to our cause. Ruby's heart raced faster now. A thought stirred in her. If they exposed the truth, maybe the town could change. Perhaps these shadows haunting them could finally be cast away. But doubts crept in, seeping into her resolve like poison. What if they come for us? What if it gets we won't get caught? The man interrupted firmly. But you must listen. The moment you step outside this shed, everything changes. Are you in? With fear pulsing through her but hope lighting a fire in her chest, Ruby nodded. She looked over at David, who gave her an encouraging smile, and her breath hitched at the thought of what they'd face. They would push back against the darkness they were standing in. But even as they steeled themselves, the voices outside grew louder, more distinct. A figure moved into her line of sight, unmistakable. "Is she in there?" a voice asked, deep and commanding. Ruby's stomach dropped as the figure advanced toward them, silhouette sharp against the fading light. "Get ready," the man urged, urgency flooding his tone. "Whatever happens, stay close to me." As they caught sight of the shadowy face looming outside, Ruby's breath hitched. The dread clamped down tighter, but she held on to her hope. They would uncover what was hidden, even if it meant confronting those who wanted to keep it buried. "What's the plan?" David asked, urgency in his voice. "Trust me," the man replied. "And remember, your fight is just beginning." But as the door to the shed creaked ominously, Ruby couldn't shake the feeling of chilling uncertainty creeping along her spine. Was confronting the darkness their only chance for truth, or the beginning of their undoing? Panic clawed at Ruby's chest as the door creaked louder, the silhouette looming closer. Shadows danced ominously around them. She squeezed David's hand tight, grounding herself in their shared resolve. "Stay behind me," the man urged, stepping forward as the door swung open, the gust of cold air stirring immediately around them. The figure stepped into the shed, revealing a stern face illuminated by the moonlight. "You need to come with us," he commanded, his voice low yet authoritative. Ruby's heart pounded. Who was he and what did they want? But she refused to be scared. "We're not going anywhere until we know the truth," she declared, surprising even herself with the strength in her voice. The man's intense gaze shifted between them and the newcomer, who seemed unfazed by Ruby's challenge. "You don't understand the danger you're in," he said, stepping further into the shed, his eyes narrowing. "Then help us understand," David spoke up boldly, taking a step forward beside Ruby. "What do you know about the package? About the town?" A wry smile twisted the man's lips. "You've stumbled upon something powerful. This isn't just a package. It's evidence that could bring down everything those in power have built." In that moment, Ruby felt a surge of adrenaline. The pieces were falling into place. "Are you telling us there's proof of corruption? And you're working for them?" She could see the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, a crack in the facade she would push through. He hesitated, guilt creeping into his expression. "I wanted to keep you safe," his voice was barely a whisper. "But they'll come for you if they find out what you know." The urgency of their situation intensified in that moment. Ruby understood something crucial. If they wanted a better future for Maplewood, they had to act. The time for hiding was past. "Then we'll fight," she said, her voice steady, "and we'll make sure the town knows the truth. We're starting with the people in that photograph." David nodded, steeling his resolve beside her. Still worried, the man shook his head, clearly torn. "You have no idea who you're going up against. They don't care about lives. They'll silence anyone who threatens their power." Ruby squared her shoulders. "Then we take action, and we do it smart. We gather support, we tell the stories that matter. If we're careful, we can gain traction. If we don't try, Maplewood loses everything." The newcomer paused, a flicker of admiration flashing in his eyes, but he remained hesitant. "You think people will follow your lead after everything? They've been fooled for too long. People are stronger than you think. They came together in the storm, and they'll stand up again. I felt it last night." Ruby's heart was pounding, not from fear but from an unwavering sense of purpose. She could feel the energy in the room shift, the air thickening with opportunity. "Meet me at the old community center tomorrow," he finally relented, uncertainty still etched in his features. "There are whispers among the people still loyal to truth." With that, he stepped back, glancing behind him as if checking for those lingering shadows. "But remember, if you proceed, you can't turn back." As the tension receded, Ruby and David exchanged glances. Comprehension dawned upon them. This was it. The opportunity to step into the light and reclaim their town. The next morning felt different. Sunlight poured through the windows, illuminating a world bright with possibility. With her heart swelled with hope, Ruby prepared herself. She gathered her notes, memories of the night fresh in her mind, a fire igniting within her. David met her at their favorite coffee shop, both of them agitated by the monumental task ahead. "What's the plan?" he questioned, excitement lacing his words. "We lay out the truth, piece by piece," Ruby answered, determination ringing true. "We'll remind everyone of the strength in this town, how we came together, how we built a community before the storm. They won, let fear win again." As they headed to the community center, Ruby could see the townsfolk starting to gather. Familiar faces came alive within her. Nervousness tangled with anticipation. They faced an unknown but essential challenge. But one thing was clear this time: they weren't alone. The chatter buzzed around her, mixing with laughter and lingering doubt, but Ruby stood tall, ready to reclaim the narrative for Maplewood. She had seen the heart of the town, its potential, and this was the moment it would unfold. As they commenced their meeting, Ruby stepped to the forefront, taking a deep breath. "Thank you all for coming. We've been through darkness, but we stand together. Today we unveil the truth that has been hidden from us." The room filled with murmurs, eyes fixated on her. "We're not just a town in crisis. We are community, and together we can hold the power to change our fate." With each word, she felt the crowd swell with purpose. One by one, familiar faces echoed her sentiment, and soon the spirit of unity enveloped them. This wasn't just about fire or flood. It was about rising above the shadows that threatened to pull them apart. As cheers erupted, the man from the shed slipped quietly into the back, his eyes locked onto Ruby, filled with a mixture of hope and fear. She realized then that their actions weren't just for them. They were for everyone who had come before, every family who had fought for this town. Adventure and uncertainty sprawled ahead, a crossroads forged in community and truth. Within the laughter and smiles of their neighbors, Ruby felt the deep-seated warmth of resilience and courage. Maplewood stood on the brink of transformation, every heart beating as one, ready for whatever came next. Embracing her role as a leader, she led the charge. "Let us tell our stories, show the world our truth, and rise together." And so they stepped into the light, hand in hand, facing down whatever would come, knowing they were far from finished. Their story was about to unfold, and they were ready to write their chapter, filled with hope and solidarity. This was the moment when whispers became roars, and as Ruby stood amidst her neighbors, she realized they didn't just survive. They thrived as a community ready to face the horizon. And with that, Ruby took a deep breath, knowing they could finally change everything. Don't miss out on any of these incredible stories. Subscribe immediately to the channel to stay updated on our next adventures. And leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help us grow. Comment below with your reactions and feelings about this amazing turnaround. You need to share this video instantly with at least 5 friends who dive deep into stories about transformation and community. Don't wait not even one more second to show your support. True fans understand just how important it is to lift each other up.